year. That's not us. That's not South Carolina. The federal government likes to wave around a $9 match like it's a silver bullet, some extraordinary benefit that we can't pass up. But what good do the $9 do us when we can't come up with the one? And what good are any dollars when they come through a program that doesn't allow us the flexibility to make the decisions that are in the best interest of the people of South Carolina? In the end, I cannot support this expansion for a very simple reason. It avoids addressing our health care system's high costs and poor outcomes. As long as I am governor of South Carolina, I will not implement the public policy disaster that is Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. Instead, we need to improve health care value, and we will. We are taking a lead in payment reform. This year alone, over $40 million of payments are tied to performance, which means better outcomes for Medicaid patients and for South Carolina taxpayers. We are asking Medicaid beneficiaries to become more engaged in their health. If a patient doesn't follow a doctor's advice to stop smoking or doesn't take their medication as prescribed, we end up spending more money than necessary, and more importantly, they'll never get healthy. We have to improve patient engagement and stop rewarding bad behavior. And we are working on hotspots of poor health. We've already reduced harmful early elective deliveries by half, and we are one of the first states in the nation to no longer pay for this poor practice. We are investing in rural health because if you have Medicaid and live in Marlboro or Bamberg, it is likely you aren't as healthy as if you have Medicaid and live in Greenville or Lexington. This is true for reasons that go far beyond health care, but that doesn't mean we can't implement changes that make a difference. We've long known that the rural hospitals face challenges that larger hospitals don't. And now, for the first time ever, the state of South Carolina is going to treat them that way. Health and Human Services now pays rural hospitals differently from urban hospitals. And starting next year, we plan to fully reimburse rural hospitals for their uncompensated care. This isn't new money, but money shifted from areas where we don't need it less, or where we need it less, to where we need it more. And we will continue to get creative as we work to improve health in the parts of South Carolina that have for too long been pushed aside. As we go forward together through this debate on health, I ask that we keep the following in mind. First, health and well-being is ultimately driven by income, education, personal choices, genetics, and support from family and community. Second, when South Carolina says we're going to do something, we have to do it well. And we will pay for it. We can't promise expanded Medicaid, but cut reimbursement so low that doctors won't see Medicaid patients. We can't promise expanded Medicaid while we continue to underfund mental health. We can't promise expanded Medicaid while maintaining waiting lists for long-term care services. We need to meet our current commitments before we promise more. Third, there is enough money in our public and private health care system today to make the system work. We can't spend our way out of this problem. That's too easy in the short term and too painful in the long term. The next 3 years is an extremely risky time for our state, budget, and our health system. And while it may be easier to take the federal money and figure out how to pay for it later, I'm not willing to commit us to a short-sighted decision we will not be able to back away from. Instead of expanding a broken program, we will continue working together to implement real health solutions for South Carolinians, because a health system that delivers the highest value will be able to thrive regardless of what the future throws at us. Finally tonight, let's talk about education. First, it would be wrong to have a discussion about education without first taking time to remember the victims of the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. In South Carolina, we have done some useful things on education in the last couple of years. We've reaffirmed our commitment to charter schools. We've invested innovation with a focus on both rural and urban areas through programs like Teach for America. General Zais has pushed the federal government for more flexibility to manage and evaluate our schools and educators, and he won. So we've seen some progress, but our state still has a long, long way to go. There is no surer path out of poverty and toward a quality of life than having a good education. But it's not only that. Having a well-educated workforce is a real factor in attracting more businesses and jobs to our state. There's a real economic element to improving education as well. I know there are some strong school choice bills that are making their way through the General Assembly, and as I've always said, I support school choice. It will be good for the parents and children in our state to be able to make their own family decisions, and it should have happened a long time ago. But I have never been one who believes that choice is the only way to improve education. It is one way, a truly important way, but we have to do other things as well. Tonight, I want to start a conversation about the way we fund K-12 schools in South Carolina. I say I want to start a conversation for two reasons. Number one, I'm not by nature a patient person, but I know from painful experience that the General Assembly is a body that does not often move quickly. So I figure let's start with a constructive conversation rather than a controversial piece of legislation, and let's see where that takes us. Number two, I know that when we start to talk about how we fund our schools, a lot of people can get really nervous really quickly. So let's take this calmly and just start with a conversation. As we all know, sometimes conversations lead to more. My starting point for this conversation is personal. Michael and I are the proud parents of 2 children in Lexington County public schools. I am grateful every day that my children attend public schools where the teachers are exceptional, where the facilities are first class, and they walk through the halls with the sense of opportunity and hope for the future that pulsates through those classrooms and hallways. But let's be honest in this conversation. What I'm describing is not what schools in all parts of our state have. I grew up in Bamberg, going to school in a brick box. My education was wonderful because of very special teachers, but when it came to resources, we didn't know what we didn't have. I know what it's like in Bamberg and in other rural and poorer areas of our state. I am not one who believes that more money is the answer to our education problems. There are other bigger factors, including poverty and broken families. But the amount of money that actually touches a teacher and student in the classroom is without a doubt a factor in the differences between those schools and between the education that those children receive. Now here's the tricky part. We must not do anything that undermines the quality of our schools, whether it be in Lexington or Greenville or any economically vibrant part of our state. The parents of those students pay their taxes that fund their education, and I will play no part in diminishing the return they receive. But we do have to figure out a better way to bring up the schools in the poorer parts of our state. And history shows that we cannot count on their own depressed local tax bases and restrictive federal dollars to do it. We need to spend our dollars smarter. We need to be more accountable. And we need to better serve all the children in South Carolina. So I want to start a conversation. And I want to start it with 3 distinguished members of this General Assembly. The first 2 are Senator John Corson and Representative Phil Owens, respectively chairman of the Senate and House Education Committees. The third person I want to reach out to for that conversation is Senator Nikki Setzler. Now, Senator Setzler and I have had some differences. That's okay. That's politics. But I respect his commitment to public education. I know he shares my interest in keeping our Lexington County schools as great as they are. And as the newly elected Senate Democratic leader, I know he and his caucus have at heart the areas of our state that are in most need of attention on education. So Senators Corson and Setzler, Representative Owens, I invite you to join me in this conversation. I'm convinced that we can change our policies in ways and improve education quality for all of our children. But I'm also convinced that we can't do that without touching some sensitive topics and without bipartisan support and consensus from all parts of our state. Let us begin that conversation. This new year, I have found myself reflecting on the last 2. I came into office wanting to make changes that move us forward in a way that people could feel it in their homes and businesses. We've had some great successes together, whether they be job announcements, taking our pension system from the red to the black, reducing taxes, fighting to protect Boeing from the federal government, or creating an office of Inspector General. In the same vein, we've had some challenges. Watching a 2-year restructuring effort fall in the Senate on the last hour, learning firsthand what businesses have been fighting for years as criminal hackers targeted our state, or watching with frustration as both parties in Washington are unable to find resolutions that help states, but instead place further burdens on them. I came away from these reflections very optimistic because I know what we have in South Carolina and I know what we're capable of when we work together. I know that we have added over 31,000 new jobs in South Carolina because we've acted as a team, from the county level to the economic development alliances to the state. The success we've had in the jobs arena shows what can happen when there is a willingness to work together. The challenges and when we lose focus on the issues and the finger pointing begins. My goal is to continue to strive for a positive environment that produces results. I ask that you join me in proving to the people of South Carolina that we are and will be more productive this year. We won't always agree, but we should always be willing to respectfully work towards a resolution for the good of the state. The people of our state have enough challenges, and they deserve the satisfaction of knowing that Columbia is working for them. We have a choice this year. We can spend our time playing politics. We can snipe at each other. We can use the pulpits we all have access to, whether it's the wells of these distinguished bodies, the microphones on top of a podium, to score political points. But I believe our state deserves better. I believe this is the year we can make the people of South Carolina proud by giving them successes on restructuring, on tax relief, on regulatory reform, on strengthening protections in cybersecurity, on health care, on education, and on raising the bar on the ethics of public officials. It's a great day in South Carolina, but it will only continue if we make it so. I, for one, look forward to the fingers going down and the handshakes of celebration beginning. Thank you, God bless you, and may He continue to bless the great state of South Carolina.
The members of the Joint Assembly will remain standing as the governor and their distinguished party depart the Joint Assembly.
All right. Here we go. Wasn't so bad, was it?
Hello, my name is Jill Moylan. I'm not a politician, but I am a lifelong South Carolinian, a wife, a mother, and for the past 20 years, someone who's worked hard to build a small business here. Like all of you, I love our state. Like all of you, I know our state can do better. It's frustrating when politics keeps us from fulfilling our potential, especially when doing better requires nothing more than doing what's right. As a South Carolinian and a business owner, I am disappointed that our governor and her team chose to ignore expert advice and decided not to take the necessary steps to protect our personal and private information. Their choices have needlessly endangered not only my business and my identity, but also the identity of my children and every other South Carolina taxpayer and their family. As a businesswoman, I see economic opportunities across our state. So it's heartbreaking that South Carolina continues to have one of the highest jobless rates in the nation. Let's do the right thing. Instead of helping Georgia's port, we should help South Carolina's port. Instead of taking taxpayer-funded trips to Paris, our governor and her team should take a trip down Main Street and focus on a fairer tax system that helps our small South Carolina businesses grow. Small businesses are forced to shoulder more and more of the tax burden. Too much of our attention is focused on large out-of-state corporations, and we are ignoring our own homegrown businesses. It is not right, it is not fair, and it costs jobs. We can do better. Economic development and education go hand in hand when it comes to realizing our potential, and we definitely can do better on education. As a public school parent, I worry that our officials seem to have forgotten the importance of public education. It bothers me to read how our schools are doing less for our kids than schools in Georgia and North Carolina. But it seems pretty simple when you know that those states have full-day, 4-year-old kindergarten. As a mother, I believe every child in South Carolina should enter first grade ready to learn. Let's accomplish that before we even consider giving our tax dollars away to private schools. And let's stop using health care to score political points. My family and I have been fortunate to have access to great doctors. Every South Carolinian deserves the same. Compromise may be a bad word to politicians, but it is the way we get business done. Name-calling and press conferences won't improve the health of a single person in this state. So let's say enough of that and make health care work for everyone. We know we can do better. I'm a mom, a wife, and a small business owner, but I'm also proud to be a South Carolina Democrat. After 10 years with Republicans controlling the governor's mansion, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, there is no one left to blame. We need a new direction. We need leaders who think more about our state than they do about themselves and their political futures. It's time for comprehensive tax and spending reform so that our tax dollars are spent efficiently and responsibly. And we need real ethics reform to make the system work for us rather than for the people who run it. The scriptures tell us that we have an obligation to the least of these. And the least of these doesn't just mean the poor. It means our children. It means our parents. It means the people in our state who work hard every day just to pay the bills. We should no longer tolerate public officials making decisions based on what is good for them rather than what is good for all of us. As a woman, we need leaders who care enough to insist that South Carolina does not continue to rank among the worst states for domestic violence. We must do better. We must do more to ensure that the physical beauty of our state is not ruined for generations to come. God gave us the most beautiful state in the country, and it's our obligation to protect it. We need leaders who can make government work for all of us. We need to recognize that no single party has a monopoly on good ideas, and that Democrats and Republicans must all work together. To move forward, we must end the strident partisanship, strive for civility, and work together. It's just that simple. We can do better, and to do better, we need change. Good night, God bless you, and God bless South Carolina.
And so education debate. I was glad to hear that. David, what I hear a lot is they do not want to see South Carolina and Columbia turn into Washington, D.C. I was so proud to see that olive branch being extended, and I feel like and I hope Senator Sessler, the new minority leader, will accept that olive branch, and we work together as a team for South Carolina.
Senator Sessler is the new minority leader in the Senate this year.
That's correct. We're looking forward to working with Senator Sessler, the senator from Lexington. We've worked great together before, and I'm as optimistic about this session that I've been in a long, long time.
Senator Peeler, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Great. Good seeing you. And now House Speaker Bobby Harrell. Speaker, thanks so much for talking to us.
David, it's good to see you again.
Great. Thank you very much. What did you think of the governor's speech?
You know, I was pleased to hear a lot of the themes of the speech. The House Republican Caucus rolled out our agenda a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of the things that we rolled out a couple of weeks ago were incorporated into the speech, things like tax reform, our concern over Obamacare and the Medicaid dollars that would be required for that, the election reform, government restructuring. I mean, a lot of the things we rolled out a couple of weeks ago were there. So I'm particularly pleased to see that. Looking forward to us as a General Assembly getting to work on all of those issues and moving South Carolina forward.
She talked about ethics reform, but didn't mention election reform very much.
Well, I think she did, actually. She talked about the people getting taken off of the ballot, which is a huge part of what the election reform is about. And that was the first item on the list of items that we put on our agenda a couple of weeks ago, actually, because it's a travesty that 250, 270 people across South Carolina got removed from a ballot simply because they didn't file a form properly. I expect that'll be fixed this year. The fix is actually not that complicated. It needs to be simple and easy to understand for everybody, and it needs to be consistent. You need to have people all filing the same way, whether they're a challenger, whether they're an incumbent, or whether there's somebody running for an open seat. Everybody filing their economic disclosure forms, they all need to be filed at the same date, filed by the same methodology, regardless of which three of those categories you're in. So I'm looking forward to us getting to work on these things, particularly the tax reform items. We were able to cut the small business income tax last year. That was very good for us to get done, but there's a lot more tax reform to get done to make our system fairer for the citizens of our state.
Speaker, thanks for taking time to talk to us. Good seeing you.
Great to see you again, David.
Great, appreciate it very much. Representative Chip Limehouse is a Republican from Charleston. Good evening, Representative Limehouse. What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, I was very pleased, David, to hear the governor say how successful we've been in taking 14,000 South Carolinians from welfare to work. And, you know, that just converse with what's happening in Washington under Obama, who's taking thousands of people from work to welfare, and shows you what a good job we're doing here in South Carolina. I was really pleased to hear the governor say that she's going to put an all-out press on eliminating the 6% personal income tax on South Carolinians. Nothing that we do this year could be more important than the elimination of our 6% personal income tax, particularly in light of what's happening in Washington with tax after tax going up under Obama. This would be wonderful if we can do this. Jobs are coming to South Carolina. People are coming to South Carolina. And this one thing alone will set us apart. Also, I was pleased with the governor's response to Obamacare, and she's talking about opting out of it. I think she's wise on that part. Obamacare will break South Carolina if we adopt it, and this General Assembly needs to opt out. We've also had a crisis here with Medicaid over the years. Every year we've scrambled to fund it, and that's a drain and a burden for us here in South Carolina.
Representative Limehouse, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us.
Thank you. Good evening.
All righty, good. Representative Senator Paul Campbell, who is joining us now, a Republican from Berkeley County.
Berkeley, Dorchester, and Charleston County.
So covering 3 counties, and one of the most enthusiastic senators over here. What did you think of Governor Haley's speech?
I think she gave a real good presentation on what we need to do in South Carolina. She outlined the priorities we need to work on. Things like infrastructure, our roads and bridges are not in the best shape that we need to put them into. We've got to come up with a way of funding it. We've got to be somewhat innovative and creative, because there's not one particular way. There's a lot of ways we can fund roads, and I think it's going to take all the above. She talked about K-12 education. I want to work on K-12 education this year. We've got to make that better. We've got to give our young people an opportunity to have success in their life. Otherwise, we'll take care of them in prisons and other kind of situations that's not very pleasant for them. We want them to be successful. We've got to give them an opportunity. You've got to learn to read so you can read to learn. So we got to start early and get them ready to go in schools. On the Medicaid issue, you know, the best thing we can do for our citizens in South Carolina, the best social program in the wide world is a job. So we need to work with Bobby Hitt, with the Secretary of Commerce. We need to work with the local counties. We need to put people to work. We need to get our unemployment rate down to where it needs to be in that 5 or 6% range. And we've got to provide opportunities for folks. Our folks are smart enough. They got a good work ethic. We've proven that. Let's just give them an opportunity.
She says she wants to have a conversation on education. Would you have preferred to hear some more details?
I would have liked to have heard more details, because I think what we need to really be working on, we need to look at funding. And we've got 80-some school districts in the state. We fund them differently. I think we need to equalize the funding. We need to at least work on the schools that aren't doing well, especially those on the I-95 corridor, the corridor of shame we call it. But we need to work on these children before they get to school. Maybe reach back to K4, maybe even earlier, so that when they get to school, they can at least read or begin reading. If they get to school and they can't read, they're behind going into it, and they just get further and further behind. And so that's something we got to work on. We want people prepared when they get to school to start learning. Again, if they learn to read, they can read to learn.
Senator, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Senator John Scott now is a Democrat from Richland County. Senator, good to see you again. Hope you're doing well. What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, the governor had some very good points. I applaud her on her performance on jobs. I do share some concerns about expanding more responsibility to her. She's correct on the bridges and roads, the $90 million we need for that, but she didn't quite tell us where we're going to get that money from. She talked about an issue that's very sensitive to me, which was in health care, and she talked about Obamacare, and still yet we talk about not receiving the money and providing health care when over a quarter of South Carolinians are on Medicaid, when in fact we need those health care and health care services, especially with rural counties now losing health care centers. She also talked about education, especially in rural communities, and as she said, her conversation, but she didn't identify a minority who would even be representative in that conversation. The two that she talked about, or the three she talked about, I think were good choices to have a conversation, but minority representation would have been really good. She talked about the Department of Administration, how large it is and how much work needs to be done. When I think for right now, attention needs to be on Department of Revenue until we can solve that major disaster that we've had over there. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of hands need to be on that. And again, I think for right now, until we can figure out the important things, healthcare, education, she also mentioned tax cuts. I don't think right now we're quite ready to have a tax cut coming out of a major recession. Although we're looking better in terms of our unemployment, we're still not quite out of the woods yet.
Senator Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, I enjoyed most of it, but I do think that the DOR hacking incident is not being talked about in the correct kind of way for our state. And there were at least 8 times when the governor referred to what we have with this Experian contract as protection. And it's not protection. Our Social Security numbers are out there, and there's no way to get them back. And I do think it's human nature to want to say we've sacrificed $12 million in an Experian contract, $20 million overall, to say that we have given you protection. But we have to remember that's our citizens' money, and we have to look at what we're getting with this Experian contract. And what they're giving us is they're saying, well, we'll let you look at your credit report for a year. And that's with Experian, which is one of 3 credit reporting agencies. Well, actually, under the FACT Act of 2003, the federal government already gives us the ability to look at our credit reports for free. South Carolina had the option to expand that, like states like Georgia and Maryland did, to allow us unlimited looks at our credit reports for free. And we didn't do that in 2003. We have fraud alerts that allow us more looks at our credit report for free, and yet we're giving Experian Experian $12 million of taxpayer money to be able to look at our Experian credit report. And I really think that's a waste of money. Another thing that they'll say is, well, we have $10 million in protection for insurance protection through Experian in case you're a victim of identity theft. But one thing we're ignoring is we already have that protection through federal law. In 1979, Jimmy Carter signed the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, which says if you catch it in time, in a reasonable amount of time, which the Experian contract requires you to file a police report within 10 days, so you have to catch it in time. If you catch it in time, you're only liable for $50 of what was taken from you. So we already have that kind of protection. So they can't tell us that we have protection when our numbers are already out there, our personal information is already out there. But I think that we're giving people a false sense of security, calling this protection, saying that we're giving them a higher level of insurance, which we already have under federal law. I think we're wasting our money. This is a 90-year problem. Experian has said they'll charge us $10 million next year and presumably every year after that. I don't know where that money's coming from. And I'm just a freshman legislator, and $12 million might not sound like a lot of money to everybody else, but it sounds like a lot of money to me.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. Good luck in your first year.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Great to be here.
What did you think of the governor's speech?
I'm troubled by the tone of anti-federal government, state rights. We have to, well, not just that, but even public education, just a lot of different things. Anti-unions, anti-working people. You know, we have to, in South Carolina, learn to embrace all branches of government. The state, the federal government, local government. The idea, for example, that our state superintendent wanted to give away, not take millions of dollars for public education. And so oftentimes that was the tone of that speech. And I'm hopeful that South Carolinians will begin to look at what's in our best interest collectively. Forget about political party, forget about race, forget about what our own ideology might be, our philosophy may be, but what's in the best interests of us, first individually and then collectively as South Carolina, as South Carolinians. And we have to focus and embrace the federal government. The health care aspect of the Affordable Care Act, I have a problem with that. And the thing where we'll have a conversation about public education. We know what we need to do with public education. And you know, I'm just wondering over the years how many businesses have not come to South Carolina because of the public education record. So I would like to see us as a state led by the governor to embrace all branches of government because we're going to need all of them.
Thank you so much for talking with us tonight.
Thank you. Okay.
And next is our Lieutenant Governor, Glenn McConnell. Past years you've done this as a legislator. What was it like sitting in back of the governor? What was your impression of the speech?
Well, it was a different perspective for me because usually I'm out in the audience, but I was there. And I was there as a Lieutenant Governor, obviously because I'm the chief advocate for aging in South Carolina. And I didn't hear anything on aging. The population's go double. The Great Tsunami is coming. It's probably one of the greatest human challenges we've got in South Carolina for the future. And I just really heard nothing. I was disappointed. I haven't seen it in legislative agendas as priorities, and I didn't hear it as a priority in the State of the Union or the State of the State address this evening, and I was very disappointed. I've been out and seen the face of aging. I've seen the South Carolinians who've lost their legs, their limbs, their mobility, that are struggling to make it every day. The programs have been cut 48%. Community and home-based are the most efficient way to go. Then I turn around, I applaud her on the regulatory side, but she didn't go far enough. Those agencies are spewing out regulations. This General Assembly needs to vote up or down on them, not let them automatically go in effect 120 days after these executive agencies are pushing them out. I just got into a dispute with DHEC, home care providers. They took a simple bill and turned it into a booklet of regulations that would choke a mule and run up the cost for seniors.
Lieutenant Governor McConnell, thank you for talking to us. Always a pleasure, and I'm sure you'll be doing some lobbying for seniors this year as we go along.
Thank you now. Take care.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Hi there, how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
I am doing fine, thanks.
What did you think of the speech?
Well, I thought it was okay. There were a few problems there, I felt. The governor, when she talked about not wanting to accept the affordable health care, I thought that was very disingenuous of her, especially when you realize that we're talking about $11.2 billion in federal monies that we're turning our backs on. We can't afford to do that. I mean, so many people are going to suffer. The hospitals, those who are recipients of these services should not be denied that opportunity. I mean, we're talking about 750,000 people that we're up here trying to help to receive better health care. Educationally, we need to do a better job of that. How can we really do a good job educationally when we're turning our backs on $300 million that we have refused to accept from the federal government? We just need to do a better job.
There was a consistent theme, it seemed, of doing more with less, doing things in a smarter way.
Well, how can you do more with less when you're turning your back on all this money that the federal government is just waiting to send our way? And what is so sad, if we don't get it, it's simply going to go to the other 49 states. It's ridiculous. We've got to do a better job.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Yes, sir. Okay. Senator Philip Massey is from Aiken County, Edgefield County?
Edgefield, yes, sir.
Yeah. And you were one of the sponsors for the restructuring bill last semester or last year.
Absolutely.
What do you think of what you heard from the governor about that?
I liked what she had to say about that. I mean, the governor's been pretty consistent in pushing for restructuring South Carolina's government because of the benefits that'll come from it. It'll make things more efficient, which ultimately it's going to be better government, but it's also going to be cheaper in the long run, a better value for the taxpayer. So I'm very pleased that the governor's behind that.
What about some of the other things she had in the speech?
Look, I thought it was a good speech. I thought she acknowledged some of the challenges that we're facing. She recognized that we're facing challenges with infrastructure. We have challenges with education. We have challenges with our healthcare system. And she offered a vision for some of those things. She offered some possible solutions. And with Medicaid as a perfect example, she didn't just say no, we're not going to expand. She says, look, we've got a problem here. And we need to try to sit down at the table, everybody come together and work out a solution to address these problems. And I thought that was really the most optimistic portion of the speech, is that she said several times she wants to sit down with people and try to work out solutions to some of these challenges that South Carolina's facing.
Have conversations on education, on other things.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and that's what she needs to do. I mean, I think that the most important part of her speech really is what she was saying. The overall theme was she's trying to lead. She wants to sit down and come up with solutions to these problems. And I think that's what a governor's supposed to do.
Senator Massey, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us. Okay, good. Senator Matthews from Orangeburg County. Senator Clyburn from Aiken County. I beg your pardon, Senator.
No,
how are you tonight?
Doing fine.
What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, I thought it was a good speech. I would just like to see some things follow up as a result of the speech.
For instance?
Well, education, for an example. You know, I think we just need a better quality of education. I think we are aware of that. But in order to do that, I think we got to change the educational formula, and I would like to have heard a little more about that.
You're talking about having a conversation, but didn't do much in laying out details about a new formula and about shifting money from some districts to other districts.
That's correct. I think the governor was very sincere about what she was saying, but I would like to have heard some details.
And the question becomes, how are you going to shift money without hurting some districts?
Absolutely. And but it has to be done, and you know, and I wanted her to say a little more about the veterans and getting them jobs and guaranteeing that they have a quality life when they get back.
What about the health care?
Well, I was a little bit disappointed. I think there's still a lot to be known about the health care, and I think South Carolina is one of the states that's really needed. And so I think there needs to be a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation on that.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Okay. And have a good session.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello.
How are you?
Fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Yes, absolutely.
What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, I think her tone of her speech was very different tonight than other State of the States. She seemed to be more conciliatory, and maybe she's learned that take no prisoners approach or take all prisoners approach just won't work if you're going to try to get something done with the legislative body. So that was positive. Also, I thought it was very positive, her wanting to start a dialogue about how we fund public education. No matter where our children are in this state, they all deserve a good quality education. I did take issue to her stance on Medicaid expansion. I think it's very crucial that we cover the 790,000 folks who are working in this state. You know, we're not talking about deadbeats, we're talking about working families who do not have health care coverage. And, you know, besides the moral issue, there's the good business sense of getting $9 and paying $1 for that $9. I mean, I think most households, if they could say somebody would give you $9 and all you had to come up with $1, I think you would do that. And so when we're smart enough to do that and figure out how we can be successful to boost our economy with the jobs that will come from that, and support our hospitals. They've spoken to us loud and clear and told us that their charity dollars are going away if we do not expand Medicaid, because that was part of the formula. You know, when the affordable...
There's been some talk that rural hospitals may be especially in trouble.
That's exactly right. And when I look at my hospital in Greenville Hospital System, and St. Francis, between the two, they have 20,000 employees. You know, there would have to be some cuts made. And so I'm not about, you know, wanting to see more people out of a job. I want more people working, and I want more people to have better health in our state.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. Good luck with this legislative year.
Okay, thank you.
Representative James Smith from Richland County is with us now.
David, how are you?
Fine. What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, it was, I guess ultimately what was not there was what concerned me, and I think what concerned many of my colleagues. You know, South Carolina is the best place in the world to live, work, raise a family. We have tremendous potential here. And you look at all of the major challenges facing our people on a daily basis, and I can't find anywhere in the speech where she addressed, and that's what a governor's supposed to do, is supposed to focus on these challenges, carve a path forward for us as a state, and take the state where we need to go. And whether it was education, I mean, healthcare was simply a no, we're not going to. It wasn't a how we address these issues, but still we're going to require South Carolinians to pay for the healthcare, $11 billion of it, for other states that will participate. And the education notion that all of a sudden, after 2 years in office, we're going to start a conversation about education. Look, it's important that the governor of our state articulate some very specific direction and course for the way forward. We need to focus on improving and reforming public education. It's fundamental to us continue to attract the best opportunities to invest and attract jobs here by improving our workforce and that we have available. And there was just nothing there. No detail. I mean, it was. If you, on every major category of concern facing South Carolina. So our concern is look, you know, we've always been here, we've always been willing, and we've got a good relationship within this General Assembly among Republicans and Democrats to find ways to work together to face these challenges. But we need something from the governor to articulate the way forward, and so it just simply wasn't there.
Thanks for taking time to talk to us
David, good to see you.
Good to see you again. Okay. Hello, Mia. How are you?
Hi, David. Fine. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Tell us what you thought of the governor's speech.
Well, you know, I really thought it was more rhetoric. It's more of the same. Actually, I was even surprised by the lack of substance. You know, as far as public education is concerned, we've been having that conversation for too long. It's time to act. And I didn't hear her talk about next steps in terms of action. And we're really at a stage in South Carolina where we need to be moving forward, not starting a conversation, especially when it comes to public education. And of course, we all want to see children in Marlborough County have the same educational opportunities and resources that children in Richland County do. but that's not a reality. So as governor, I was looking for and hoping that she would come up with some real solutions to help us move the state forward in a better direction. As far as cybersecurity is concerned, I'm just baffled by how we can start at 25 million. I mean, that's what we're looking at now, just to clean up this mess or to begin to clean it up. But South Carolinians are going to be stuck after a year. I mean, a year of free credit protection is not enough. And the state has an obligation to its citizens to make sure that they don't have the burden of an additional expense that wasn't caused. They were harmed by this and will be harmed by this for years to come. So, I didn't hear about the accountability as far as that's concerned. It was almost as if she considers herself a victim. I think her words were, we all felt a jolt when this happened. Yeah, we did, but some of us are in leadership positions, and some of us have a job to do to make sure that our citizens are covered, and we have to be responsible and accountable to them for the issues that we have that we're dealing with, and cybersecurity is definitely one of them.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Representative Todd Rutherford, who was the new Democratic minority leader in the House. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you, David.
So you have a new role now as speaking for your colleagues. What do you think of the governor's speech?
Well, I thought she did a great job introducing people in South Carolina that are important, and she talked about our military, which is extremely important to South Carolina, and those that gave their lives so that we could have freedom in this country. However, I thought she was very short on details as it related to education in particular. She said she was going to begin a conversation, and in particular begin that conversation with Senate leaders. Democrats are ready. We've been ready. 4-year-old kindergarten. We don't want to have a conversation about it. We're ready to implement it. Georgia has it. North Carolina has it. They have better graduation rates than South Carolina does, and it's no secret. We need to do it as well. We've got details. We want to make sure that there's equitable funding around the zip codes, around the state. So why are we still talking about it when we can go ahead and do it? She was a great cheerleader for jobs. She's talked about bringing jobs to South Carolina. We know that she's been doing some of that. But the problem is that when they get here, if they have to interview 11 people for every one person they hire, it's because our educational system is failing. It's because our healthcare system is failing. And you've got 800,000 South Carolinians without insurance. The ability to insure over 250,000 of those people, create jobs in the process. And what our governor talked about is making sure that we spend that money wisely. We can make sure we spend our money wisely while also insuring over 250,000 more people.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. Good luck in the new year.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Laurie Funderburk from Kershaw County joins us now. Representative Funderburk, good to see you.
Good to see you.
What did you think of the governor's speech overall?
Well, certainly we have a lot of issues that are facing South Carolina, and so there is a lot to talk about. I was disappointed that I didn't hear a few items mentioned in her conversation about education, which certainly needs to be one of the focal points of any policy discussion in South Carolina. I really wanted to hear about early childhood education. I wanted to hear about 4K. I also think that we need to focus heavily on higher education and making sure that we have a prepared and educated workforce here in South Carolina. And I know that a lot of families are struggling with the cost of higher education, which is so crucial to getting a job these days. Another thing was business taxes. I know that we have one of the highest in the nation manufacturing property tax rates in South Carolina, and I know that a lot of our businesses on the local level are shouldering a disproportionate burden of the taxes. And so that is a crucial conversation that we need to have as well.
Cybersecurity.
Yes. Citizens in our state are very puzzled at how such a hacking of such a magnitude could have happened here in South Carolina, and it is a responsibility that South Carolina is going to have not only for today's folks, but for our children and grandchildren. And so we have an enormous responsibility to the citizens of South Carolina to make this right and to make them feel secure about the information that they share with us as a state.
Okay, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us. Okay, good luck. Representative Walt McLeod is next. Representative is from Little Mountain, Newberry County. Great.
Being with you.
Thank you for talking to us tonight. What did you think of Governor Haley's third State of the State speech?
Well, it was pretty good, but it could have been improved. First, let me say that it was a pleasure to sit behind the governor for her last 2 years in the House. I enjoyed working with her as a member of the Lexington County Legislative Delegation. I'd second like to thank her for what appears to be a new bipartisan initiative, particularly with respect to the public schools. Her desire to reach out to the 3 persons responsible for the public schools in the legislature, I think, is a wonderful notion. The public schools are at risk. They need help, and I hope that Governor Haley can help them. And finally, I'd like to say that it's most regrettable to completely give a stiff arm to health care reform in America. Medicaid is a part of health care reform. There are many other parts. The offer to pay for the uncompensated care for rural hospitals is a real nice thought. But I think probably that it would be infinitely far less than what the state would receive if it participated in the health care reform in America. So we need all the help we can get. I compliment the governor and wish her much luck. It was a pleasure knowing her when she was in the House.
Representative McLeod, Democrat from Lexington County, among others.
It was Lexington County, but I got no more election than strictly Newberry County. It's my honor to represent Newberry County now, but it certainly was a pleasure representing the Chapin part of Lexington County.
Thanks so much for talking to us tonight.
Nice to see you again.
Great, good to see you. Representative Jerry Govan, good to see you again. How's everything going?
You've been doing all right?
Yes, sir.
Good.
What did you think of Governor Haley's speech?
Well, I think that there were a lot of things that were said tonight that really are contingent upon whether we're going to have the follow-through. I think that in terms of details, she talked about health care, she talked about education, but in terms of details, in terms of how to address those issues from a funding standpoint, we didn't hear a whole lot. But I was encouraged by the fact that she did want to start a dialogue, and I think we need to have that because we're going to have to set some priorities.
What about the cybersecurity? Did you hear enough about that?
Well, you know, the cybersecurity issue has been bothering me for quite some time. I think we really, from the standpoint of a legislator and talking to his constituents, people are very much concerned about that. I'm not so sure that solution is going to be available to us immediately, but I think the steps that have been taken, I spoke with Director Keel with SLED a couple of days ago. I think they're moving and doing as best they can, working with the feds in terms of trying to address the problem. But I'm concerned about the fact that it occurred in the first place, and that really bothers me.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us, Representative
you.
Govan, and good luck with the legislative session coming up.
Thank you so much, and look forward to ETV doing what it does best, and that's providing coverage for the people.
We will do the best we can. Thank you so much. And that is our coverage of the governor's third State of the State address. We would like to thank the ETV viewers, and also those who are listening on ETV radio for being with us tonight. And now we join our regularly scheduled programming, which is already in progress.
The interesting thing is now Hendricks, who was the young challenger, was now sitting in trees where James had once sat. Obviously James had to find somewhere else to go. He's had to cross quite a number of roads and negotiate fences, dogs, all sorts of things. It was only a couple of weeks ago and he was still sitting in that backyard.
The significance